welcome back to my channel. I'm super excited to have a new guest with us today, Shyvee Shi. Shyvee is right now a product manager at LinkedIn Learning. She's also an influencer on LinkedIn. Shyvee and I went to the same undergrad back in Hong Kong, and after graduated from our undergrad, she joined consulting at Accenture, and I joined investment banking at Credit Suisse and JP Morgan. We both came to the US to do our MBA. After Shyvee graduated from Kellogg, she first became a consultant at Deloitte Consulting, and then she pivoted into a product adjacent role at LinkedIn and later become a product manager on the LinkedIn Learning team. Shyvee has 50,000, congratulations Shyvee, followers on her LinkedIn. And if you're interested in getting more resources and tips about breaking into product management, check out her LinkedIn page. I'll put a link down below in the descriptions. So first things first, what do you think are the common paths for folks to break into this industry?
First thing is you can choose to transfer internally if you have the opportunity to work within a tech company. Second path is to join an APM or Associate Product Management program, either straight out of undergrad or through graduate school programs like MBAs or other master programs. The third path, which a lot of people might have ignored, is actually join a startup company where they're looking for a jack of all trades positions. So PM, they might use that as a title, but you might be serving more than traditional PM scope.
If you already are thinking about pivot into product management, how do you actually do that? We've summarized this path into MVP framework. Shyvee, what is MVP?
So in the traditional product management sense, MVP stands for minimum viable product. The MVP framework that we wanted to help you guys, aspiring PMs, to become PM, is kind of echoing that sentiment of like iterating and continue to improve yourself, collecting feedback from the market. But the M here stands for mindset, V stands for value prop, and P actually stands for three different components: people, project, and process, which in a bit we can talk about each element in detail.
And I just wanted to stress that when I first thinking about becoming a PM, I have a perfectionist mindset, which is like very detrimental for your success on this journey, because you always feel like you need to be fully ready, but you'll never be ready, right? I don't know if Shyvee can like attest to that, but I constantly feel like I'm not ready and I just need a little bit more time to learn and talk to people, or just wait and feel a bit more ready before I take the first step. But that basically just slow you down?
Yeah, I think that's actually the first mindset, which is you probably will never feel ready. And imposter syndrome feels very, very real, because even when you become a PM, I still sometimes feel like I'm like maybe not qualified for the role, or maybe I'm too slow, there's too much to learn, and I'm just never good enough, you know? So I think the number one mindset to change is actually not be bogged down by being perfect, but what is the smallest step that you can take to start telling your story to potential hiring teams, future PMs, and try to just validate, you know, whether that story resonate with the people they're looking to hire you.
Yeah, so another mindset, which is the second mindset, is what is your motivation of becoming a product manager? The reason why this question is so important, it's probably more important for a product manager than many other roles, is because pivoting into PM is very competitive and challenging. Sometimes it feels more like a marathon than a sprint, right? So you should not expect that you can become a PM overnight. Maybe that's an exaggeration, but I think a lot of folks start like losing patience or confidence after they try for a month and there's no interview, or they didn't get an offer and they felt this is just not working. But in reality, it takes an average person at least 6 to 12 months to pivot into product management, especially if you doesn't have prior product or tech experience. So that is like the most important question that you wanted to answer. So Shyvee, what's your motivation of becoming a PM?
Actually, I developed that motivation over time. I didn't have a conviction for whether PM was the right fit for me. Again, imposter syndrome makes me feel like I didn't have a computer science degree. I was really good at making slides. I thought maybe that's my motivation, that's my why. But over time, I realized, hey, I'm really passionate about solving impactful problems. And one of the best way to do that at scale is through the role of product management. And I also super passionate about owning the end-to-end solution, right? From ideating validating if that need is the right need through user research, to working with engineers, mocking up designs and talking with our design partners and measuring success end to end. So when I was working at consulting, I realized that sometimes I do sort of part of that journey in the upfront, but never stick around till I see the results and learn from it. So I really miss and really want to do that end to end.
All right, so let's move on to the second letter, V, which stands for value propositions. What does that mean, Shyvee?
A lot of people tend to approach their PM job search thinking that every PM jobs are the same. You have an even chance to land every role, but that's wrong. There's different type of PM jobs, and some of them are going to value your superpower more so than the other ones. Are you more technically driven? That maybe a platform PM role is a better fit. If you historically are really good with numbers, being very analytical, then something like a data product manager might be a better role for you. And in the past, if you're really good with customer experience mapping, user research, then maybe a more design-focused product role is a better fit. So I think value prop in the sense is just like figuring out what your superpower is and translate that to what a particular PM role is looking for, and making sure you can make that bridge very clear through a really good storytelling around your personal experience during self-intro, as well as during the interview process. It's almost like matchmaking, you make sure that you're looking for the right role that's the right fit for you, leveraging your right skill set. I think the only caveat here I want to say is that a lot of people think about a dream PM role that they want to pursue, but sometimes it takes multiple steps. So in my case, for example, I knew I wanted to become a PM, but I couldn't get to my PM role right away, like my dream PM role right away, which is focused on educational product. So I had to take a first step, going for a internal program manager / product role, focusing on sales tools, because that was where most of my consulting experience was helping to drive digital transformation through CRM, customer relationship management tool. So that was the easiest route for me to get my foot in the door into tech as well as into product. And then from there on, then you can do a second pivot to get into your dream product role.
That's a perfect segue into the first P in the 3 Ps that we're going to talk about. It's about people. What does people mean?
Yeah, so I think actually, and when you think about searching for and finding your first PM jobs, there's multiple people in your sort of support system. So the first thing you mentioned is the hiring team. Obviously, be able to know someone who can maybe give you a referral, or someone who are willing to do an informational coffee chat with you to offer insider tips and insight into how a company or team operates, and eventually up to the hiring manager. So that's group 1 of the hiring team, people. But then when I think of people, I think there's more to that, right? That you can look for the second group, which I call peer mentors group. So these are the group people who are, potentially 1 or 2 steps ahead of you. Maybe they were a career pivoter as well. Maybe they were investment banker consultants, working in product adjacent role. How did they make their way into product? Can you look for coffee chat with those people to learn from them? Eventually, some of them might overlap with the first group. Maybe they're hiring, and they will be more open to people like you who have shown your effort, your sincerity into looking for a product role and learning from them. I think the third group is really the support group. This could be groups that can do mock interview with you and just learning from each other. They can hold each other accountable. But most importantly, during this very special period of time, 6 to 9 months, potentially even longer, you want to surround yourself with people with positive energy, that they can support you, uplift you. Even when moments were hard, they understand what you're going through, versus the naysayer that we're trying to talk you down. Like, are you sure you want to go through that transition? You want to go with people who are more positive, thinking about, hey, maybe you need a rest and recharge, but then you can come back and keep pushing through.
I think a common mistake that people make when they're thinking about pivoting to product management is studying and sitting at home silently. And I thought that if I do these questions really well, then I'll be able to pivot into a new industry. And this is definitely not the case for product management. You have to go out. You have to stop sitting there, and hopefully you can come up with the best answers for those very ambiguous product questions. You have to find people to practice and have to talk to hiring manager to figure out what they're looking for.
I think that's a really good segue to the second P, which is process, nailing the process, which is very much like the product MVP, right? Like you have the minimum set of product feature, you go out asking customer for feedback, and then continue to iterate from there. I think same. If you think of your job search, your PM job search process as a product, you are selling yourself as a product, then you would go out and test whether your sales pitch makes sense to the hiring team.
Yeah.
You need to do your market research by looking at what jobs are out there, what kind of people get those jobs, and is your profile fitting those? And then you also need to practice and increase your reps with your peer, groups, just to get comfortable talking about your own story, answering some of those product questions.
When you have done like 20, 30 mock interviews, when you do the next one, it doesn't feel like interview anymore. If you have that feeling, I think that's like the sign of being ready.
I knew when I went on the actual interview for both Google, Facebook, and LinkedIn, I feel very ready after those mock interviews, so it definitely worked.
Cool, let's go through the last P, which stands for side projects.
Yeah, so I think projects are very important in the sense of like helping you build a relevant product experience. Because for aspiring PMs, a lot of us knew that we have certain skill gaps, whether it's never worked with engineers before, for example, could be one, or never, work with designers, or never built anything other than maybe a PowerPoint slide deck, right? In my example. Or a financial model, right? You never build like a physical product. I think the idea is that you can gain experience by proactively seeking projects to work on. So this could come from if you're already working in a tech company, you have access to PM. So maybe you help them on their daily job, shadowing them and help them ship certain products. So that's the best way. And then you can either then go from there, transfer internally to their team, or use that experience outside for interview, and people will buy in more about your product experience. And then besides working for a PM, you could also look for outside opportunity to potentially help a startup, maybe do some product research, do some pro bono volunteering project work for maybe a local organization, try to design a no-code solution for them. So in that sense, you have to learn kind of interviewing to get like what's the right product, just problems to solve for, how do you design, what's the cheapest design that you can come up the quickest. I think the tip that I got for people is that, can you come up with a product during the weekend? So in 2 days. If so, then that's the right starting point. That's how much time you should spend to get your first iteration out and start validating.
Yeah, so when I was like doing side projects, there's a few things I tried out. First of all, I helped a education technology startup to be their first PM. It's definitely no pay, but I got a lot of experience working with engineer, which I could talk about when I was interviewing for other companies. Second, I took a lot of CS courses, which gives me the opportunity to work with people from different schools, like engineering school with technical background, from design school, who's gonna come in and do the mocks, where I play the PM, I like the hypothetical PM roles, where I put the team together and try to define the specs and think about go-to-market. And lastly, I also did like I self-coded my own website, and that was like a way to show that despite not having like a CS background, I still know the language and can still talk about the technical terms. That is the MVP framework, which stands for Mindset, Value Propositions, People, Process, and Project. Woo! All right, that's it for today. Thanks, Shyvee.
Thank you for having me. Good luck.
Bye.
Bye.